Hey, this is my first YouTube video post. I've actually been toying around with this possibility for quite some time now as just kind of a creative and otherwise output for various things, ideas, rants, ramblings about verbatim what I put on my Facebook page for this possibility. But yeah, I would say that several times a week I'll come up with some sort of an idea, some sort of rumination on typically involving some aspect of existence, as vague and widespread as that might be. I'll just kind of have these mental exercises with these observations on different things, and I really enjoy posting them. So this, I think, would be a little bit more personable. I think that it sounds and feels a little more genuine when it's me speaking. I think that oftentimes written word, although it may be easier to convey what you're trying to say more fully and more robustly, somehow, sometimes it ends up losing that personal touch, especially because I know that a couple of my friends and acquaintances can feel that my writing can sound possibly a little bit impersonal, a little bit flowery and bombastic. So, yeah, I'm going to try this. I'm going to see where it goes, and we'll see how it's received, if it is received, and if not, fuck it. So, yeah, I'll just go ahead and start with this pondering that I had just yesterday on how we have this kind of, I see it as a conceptual fallacy of simplifying things into metaphors so that we can more readily understand them. I think that a perfect example of this would be workings in cells, where you'll have small particles and you'll have moving around ion pumps. You have, I won't go into the organelles and the workings of a cell, but they're very small parts. Obviously, our body is made up of trillions of cells, but typically to understand and to be able to fully conceptualize the working of a cell, we'll relate it to something that is on our scale, on our scope, that we're familiar with. I think the example I used was a potassium pump, pumping in a potassium ion, and obviously that's going against its concentration gradient, and so it requires energy, it requires ATP in order for that to happen. For it to pump in, there's more potassium inside, so it's going against its, metaphorical current, if you will. And so what I posed as a possible metaphor for that would be, so that we could more readily understand it, would be someone swimming against a current, swimming upstream. And so you're fighting and you're exerting more energy in order to move in that direction. But although that is simpler for us to understand than perhaps the way that these different proteins are stimulated and open up and allow for these potassium ions to actively diffuse through a cell, it's obviously far easier for us to understand someone swimming against a current. We're familiar with swimming, we're familiar with people, we're familiar with streams and currents, but not quite as readily familiar with ions and, gated channels in cells. But what I'm getting at is that a person and the mechanisms involved with that person swimming against the current is vastly more complex than a single ion diffusing actively through a cell. All of the workings involved in someone swimming against a current, I don't even know where to begin to start really analyzing all of the workings that go into that movement. You have, cardiac regulation, you have muscle contraction, you have the neurological input, you have the person willing himself to move forward. And then you have the physics of the water and the way that it's pressing against that person, the equation of how much force he would need to exert to overcome the prevailing force of the current. And I mean, it's not even worth me delving into all of the details there. But somehow, we don't, as human beings, through some sort of mechanism, through some sort of instinct, we just kind of inherently understand it because we've experienced it. To understand the basic idea of I will be pushed back in a current, you just need to step into a stream. And if you don't, you've been taught enough, we've been conditioned enough that just about anyone, who can think for themselves, that are past 3 or 4 years old, can understand that concept. And I just find it really, really interesting that when we're discussing something really, really small and really, really actually physically or mechanically far more simplistic than something like someone swimming upstream, we still have to bring it to our scope. Even if it makes it more complex, it's what we are conditioned to, it's what we are familiar with. And so it is relatively simpler to us. It's amazing because I really feel that we do this in every aspect of our life. And obviously it deals with things on greater, larger, more complex scales. We'll bring it back to our level and we'll say, okay, well, let's say like a supernova is like, lighting a firework. Obviously that's a horrible example and I'm not too familiar with all of the physics involved with a supernova. But, I mean, that's probably how we'd relate it to something. We'd relate it to an explosion on a scale that we're familiar with. And then, as I mentioned before, on the flip side, which I think is more interesting, when things are on a very, very small, often microscopic scale, and the workings involve far less amounts of synergistic mechanisms to carry out what they're doing, and then we bring it up into the more complicated realm in the scope of what we're familiar with, and we associate it with that and create metaphors in order to make it relatively simpler. So I just find that very, very fascinating that we have to bring things, regardless of its level of complexity or simplicity, we bring it to our level of scope and our relative simplicity in order to comprehend things. So, I did warn you briefly, albeit that these were going to be ramblings, as they most certainly are, hopefully, as I do more of these videos. Excuse me. I had 2 hours of sleep last night. I have an exam today. Jesus. Anyway, I need to get doing that right now, actually. But, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to refine and slim down and kind of streamline my rants and rambles later on. But, yeah, I suppose that's it for today. I definitely would like to possibly bring in even music reviews, as I'm a huge music buff. I'd like to do movie reviews. I mean, this is it's going to be difficult for me to really narrow it down to exactly what I want to do. Hopefully I can streamline that concept as I continue and make more movies, so that it's not just come on and watch whatever the fuck Sajan's going to cover today. We have no idea why I would watch this and what I'm in for, and so I think that'll be easier if there's a kind of at least generalized focus. So anyway, I hope all of you have a good day if anyone does end up seeing this, and take care. Goodbye.